Вітаю, з вами Олесь Гарджук та уся команда UATV.
Large-scale, grandiose event is taking place, a conference on Ukrainian reforms. That's why our team, together with Every Team Canada, is launching a special series of interviews for you, dear viewers, will be able firsthand to find out to what extent the changes in Ukraine are efficient, effective, and what results could be expected by the end of 2019. The topic today is media reform, reform of the media market, and we are going to discuss it with Ms. Svitlana Ostapa, the chairman of the board of the National Civil Company of Ukraine. Thank you, Ms. Svitlana. Prior to discussion, I would like you, dear viewers, to watch a short overview of the conference and the reform.
Kyiv, Public Broadcasting Company of Ukraine. This monumental colossus is a dreadful monument to the Soviet era. It was built right on the bones and slabs of the Jewish cemetery. Not far away, there is the sadly remembered Babi Yar. And there, a little bit further and to the north, just in 83 kilometers, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Info Chernobyl. This is what we have inherited. Unprofitable state-owned company inside the headquarters that is falling apart. Huge but inefficient staff and structure with a large set of obsolete equipment. As a result, we've got boring content, zero ratings and bleak prospects. In the competitor surrounding of prosperous private media empires built by oligarchs to protect their interests. Info Chernobyl is a toxic information space infected with lies and manipulations. A show instead of news, actors instead of journalists. The oligarchic media transforms Ukraine into the exclusion zone of truth and common sense. Our team has come here to transform a post-Soviet state-owned broadcaster into a modern public broadcasting company to make it important and valuable for the society. We will deactivate toxic information in Ukraine, independent public broadcasting for every Ukrainian. This is Suspilne. During the last 2 years, we've relaunched and rebooted main TV and radio channels. We optimized this stuff by having cut down about 3,000 employees. We are building new studios, a modern high-technology news house. The ratings have raised. We are gradually expanding our channel's audiences by attracting younger viewers and listeners. We've created digital platforms. Hot autumn is waiting for us. By the way, autumn in Kyiv is very beautiful. Welcome. Welcome to the only independent media company of Ukraine. We will make Ukrainian informational space vivid and bright. Suspilne is a part of you.
Well, Ms. Svitlana, maybe the main task of our discussion is going to explain the viewers that we should not underestimate the media reform, and not only by the journalists, but the media will educate not only the journalists but the society. And what were the changes, and how did you start those changes? Which reform was happening in your channel? Well, the reform of the public broadcaster was being prepared and discussed for more than a decade. And then we were talking about the necessity for Ukraine as a democratic state to have a public broadcaster. But until the present in Ukraine, there were a lot of state-owned broadcasting channels which have not been working in accordance with the standards of the profession. They were obtaining funds from the budget and they were controlled by the government, by the authorities, absolutely. And they were discussing the topics which were ordered by the authorities. The authorities changed, and these broadcasters, and there were 30 of them both in the center and in the regions, were providing services to the government and to the authorities. And thus, Ukraine decided to create the public broadcasters on the basis of 30 state-owned broadcasting companies. At first, the law has been passed. It was a very difficult process to pass this law. Everybody was promising to enact this law, but nobody really did anything to do that because the authorities did not want to be deprived of this resource. But after the Revolution of Dignity in 2014, this law was enacted, and it spelled out that the public broadcaster of Ukraine will be based on the 30 governmentally owned the broadcasters, both in the center and in the oblast. So does that mean that they have been united into the holding? Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell a lot about that, but that was very difficult to consolidate the state-owned companies. You had to change absolutely everything. Yes, we had to consolidate them into one company. And it happened in January 2017. The public stock joint company was created, the National Public Broadcaster of Ukraine, Suspilna. Suspilna actually is a little bit over 2 years old, but it took us several months to launch one of the most important bodies of the company, which I am heading today, and the new management of the Suspilna was appointed. Well, how is it different from the previous government-owned public, the government-owned companies? The authorities were appointing the head of the former channel UT1, which also was part of the public broadcaster, and definitely they had exerted the influence of the heads of the company. Yeah, but now the head of the Suspilna was elected on the basis of the competition, Zoraba Lasanya, and the Suspilna started to operate. So the procedure of appointing of the management has been changed. Now it is being done in the open competition basis. Yeah, that's true. And what other changes could you tell us about, and which prove that this will be a prerequisite of providing the truthful information which is not being dictated by the government, and how the procedure of the election and appointment of the management is affecting this process? On the basis of the charter and the main directions of the work of the company, which has been approved by the board. Well, Zoraba Lasanya with his team started to actually clean the contact from the toxic product, as he is telling them. The materials which are made to order, and those which are engaged with certain individuals. And now we do not offer these materials. But what has not changed is the source of financing. The channel is being financed from the budget, and it is a fixed amount, 0.2% of the state budget of the previous year. And this budget financing is going to be provided to the national broadcaster, Suspilna. Without this budget financing, the company would not be able to survive at present. And the law does not spell out these other sources of financing. Actually, in the budget, there are certain provisions, like, for example, the taxes, but the mechanism has not been developed how to do that. That's why we started to work under the situation when we are to obtain the budget financing, but from the very beginning, starting from 2017, well, the channel was not very significantly underfinanced. Well, it always affects the products and the audience. Well, for the first year, 50% have not been underfinanced. And this state machinery of financing has to be changed. We also had to lay off a lot of staff personnel, make a lot of layoff payments, and various social benefits had to be paid for those people. And the company needed a lot of funds at that particular point of time, but they had to also spent a lot of financial resources to lay off the extra personnel. And the next year also the budgetary financing was not sufficient. And then the experts, together with the board, have developed a proposal to the parliament to change the mechanism of financing so that the budget could not be decreased in manual management mode. So you have decreased it to 40% of the state budget. Yeah, but we have developed a different mechanism. In certain public broadcasters in other countries exists, this mechanism exists, and it protects the independence of this broadcaster. And nobody can, decrease this budget. And the representatives of the Council of Europe yesterday at the conference in Toronto were underscoring that this was one of the most important reforms in Ukraine which took place. And the Deputy Secretary General of the Council of Europe, who was speaking yesterday, said that a lot of work has been done and the new system of financing was implemented with the help of the Council of Europe. It was developed and promoted with the help of the Council of Europe experts. And she said that a huge work has been done, but we still have a lot to do to make these changes irreversible. Well, yeah, we do know that when the financial resources are available, it is possible to develop interesting and useful product. But another question which is related to the reforms, we have quite a complex situation in Ukraine, especially, due to the occupation of the Crimea and the war in the east, under the conditions of the reform of the media market and under the conditions of reform of the Suspilna, the public broadcaster. How do you oppose the Russian propaganda? Thank you for this question. Here at this conference, there was an activity carried out. We have transferred to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, and the Canadian members of the Parliament and the members of the Council of Europe, the appeal of the journalists of Ukraine and the NGOs, and also the journalists who have been laid off from the ZIG channel, and they are protesting against Viktor Medvedchuk buying the channels, television channels in Ukraine, and thus he would like to influence the information space and influence over the people, especially in the western parts of Ukraine. How did they perceive this situation? And they are aware of it, and they know that Viktor Medvedchuk has an intention to buy other channels as well. They are concerned about it. They understand that this is a manifestation of the influence of Russian Federation over the information space, and it threatens the situation in Ukraine with instability. And in this situation, the public broadcaster Suspilna has even more obligations at present, because when media space is being divided between the oligarchs and large channels are protecting the interests of their owners, they are not going to actually provide negative information about their owners, even if this information is absolutely correct. That's why the Suspilna, the broadcaster, public broadcaster, has a task to provide the truthful information to the society, and so that the public trusts it. So let us wait for the response to this appeal of the Ukrainian journalists to the international organizations, and we hope that the international community is going to actually respond to this appeal. And thank you for this discussion. This was Ms. Ostapa, the chairwoman of the board of the Suspilna broadcaster. And please stay with us, our dear viewers, because we are going to cover the events which occur within the framework of the conference in Toronto.